and it's been a joy, the entire process. Okay? So I'll start here. I've got some information on different paranda traditions around the Caribbean. So first, I would like to thank Cheryl and Ronnie for organizing this, and for GAHFU in general for their work in the community here in Los Angeles and in other places as well to preserve and maintain Garifuna culture. It's very, very important. I also would like to thank Mercedes Douglas here at UCLA for providing the space for us to have this and record the Paranda workshop. So, as you see on the map here, or in the first slide here, I wanted to create something that would give an idea of the cultures that we'll talk about. From the Garifuna, the principal main focus, to Trinidad and Tobago, and also here on this side is the flag of Venezuela, and we also have Puerto Rico there. Okay. So those are some of the traditions that we'll talk about today, and I'll move through this quickly so we can get on to Mr. Aziatic. Okay. So the purpose of why we are here, and some things that I wanted to discover and to discuss during this presentation. And that is, first, the purpose to identify the musical and cultural traditions that share the name Paranda or Paranda in the Caribbean region. So we want to look at that. To note similarities and differences in social and cultural functions in these traditions. So we look at how these traditions are similar and how they're different. Also to note differences and similarities in how the music is performed. That's what we also want to look. And to explore the Garifuna Paranda and to reveal why it's unique as a form of male social commentary and that which is accepted by the entire culture as a form of identity or a way of expressing identity. So our cultures that we'll talk about today: Puerto Rico, of course, Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Garifuna culture as expressed, of course, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And here in the Garifuna diaspora, including Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and other places. So, when we look at the map of the Caribbean, I wanted to include this because this encompasses the entire region of what we'll be talking about today. Starting here in Puerto Rico, from the Paranda tradition there, then going into Venezuela, here, in the areas near Caracas, and an area, Guatire, which is close, not far from Caracas, and then into Trinidad and Tobago, and then, of course, into Central America, where we have the Garifuna and the 4 countries we mentioned before. Okay? Now, let's start with Puerto Rico. We see a map here, and we'll be looking at traditions as it is done, as it's performed today, and as it's traditionally been performed, the paranda, in these particular areas. Now you see the name Boriquen. This is the Taino word for Puerto Rico, for the country. Okay, and this is what they came, and it means the land of the valiant Lord. Yeah. Okay. Now the parandas are festive holiday celebrations in which carolers travel from house to house singing aguinaldos. And these aguinaldos really are a form of Christmas carols, and they come from the people who live in the countryside called the jibaros. This is jibaro music. That they travel from house to house and they beg for pasteles or tamales and coquitos, which is spiced eggnog, rum-spiced eggnog. Now the carolers, they typically get larger as they go from one community to the next, or one house to the next. As they go in, they dance, they sing, the people there feed them a little bit, then they go on to the next house. Does this sound familiar within Garifuna culture? And yes, because we have this in Guanaragua, as it is done. Okay. So now the roots of Boricuan, Puerto Rican culture, are based on Taino, Spanish, and West African traditions. Now, this period of celebration that they have goes not just during Christmas time, but it extends actually into January as well, and actually into mid-January. But the principal days are Noche Buena, which is, of course, Christmas Eve, Navidad, Christmas, Despida de Año, which is New Year's Eve, of course, and El Día de Reyes. Now, this particular particular day, January 6th, also important again because it is Three Kings Day, and it's very important in Belize as well, and in Guatemala and Honduras as the day in which the children participate oftentimes in Guanaragua. Okay? Okay. Now, Christmas in Puerto Rico. You have aguinaldos, which are Christmas carols themselves. They sing also what is a music forms called decimas, which are 10-line stanzas of poetry that is transformed into song, made of 10 lines. And then you have in many cases, the Puerto Ricans represent, they dress up, and then they used to do this many years ago, but now in most of the videos that I've seen, they don't wear the country apparel that they used to. So they represent the people who will come from the countryside into the cities, and they would have the straw hats and various other things. Of course, nowadays, instead of the straw hats, baseball caps and various other things. So contemporary culture has prevailed in that case. Okay, so also some of the instruments that you will find here. We have the guitarras, tamboriles, which is the skin drums, of course, the guiro. Now, which are the metal scrapers, and also the gourd here. The guiros, you have two types. This is made of gourd, and you also have one of metal. And you have the maracas, of course, and the palitos. Now, the palitos are two, they said this is probably the oldest of the instruments, and these are just the two sticks here that are struck together. Of course, this is related to the clave, okay? Says that that's what you'll have. So when we look at this particular picture here, this is what you will find in Puerto Rico, but you will also find especially the maracas and the guiro, some form of guiro, plus a string instrument in almost all of the paranda traditions, especially Venezuela, Trinidad, and here in Puerto Rico. Okay. Now, I want to show you this particular painting that is from a site called El Boricua and the Puerto Rican, and they have information on the site about paranda and about other cultural practices associated with Puerto Rico. And this is a painting of how it may have been at some point, how it was in the past, when people would go with the straw hats from house to house. You see the cuatro here, and you'll find people drinking here, going inside the home, surprising them at night is what they would oftentimes do. And the purpose here is to go and to go with your friends to one particular home. You will sing, you'll wait, and then you will start the music to awaken the person, go in, sing for a little bit, go inside, and that is when you get refreshments. You do this for a while, and then you go to the next house, and then it ends and goes on until dawn. Now, most of the times the people are not really surprised because they give signals to them during the course of the week. You know, somebody may be coming by your house or something along this line to let them know that this particular thing will happen at the home. So they give them hints throughout the week that this will happen. Now, this continues for some time, as I mentioned to you, and they go from one house to the house to another in the given neighborhood. Now, the group grows in size as this occurs, and they continue on, as I mentioned, at dawn. And when they get to the last house, that's when they are given chicken soup and other local dishes to eat. Okay, so let's look at an example here of a group arriving at one particular house. And this is in Paranda 2013 in Puerto Rico. Okay, So I wanted to give you an example of what that sounds like, what you would do if you participated in paranda in Puerto Rico. Now let's look at another song here, and this is called De la Montaña Venimos, okay? And in this particular case, it is from the mountains we come to invite you to eat roasted pig. The tradition is they'll have a pig on a stick that they'll roast, a small pig. Roasted pig on a stick, homemade rum, as we found out yesterday, moonshine, the homemade rum to drink. And it says, Lady Maria, compadre Jose, open the door so I can see them. Open the door, friend. It is already 3 in the morning and I have not yet had a drop of coffee. So they're going from house to house, and this is what happens. Now, paranda songs are usually more secular than they are religious, and although some of the traditions of the aguinaldo sometimes they maintain the spirit of the season. So sometimes they do have this references to Christmas and things. Okay, so that is Puerto Rico. We'll go on to Venezuela now. So we see the map here. I want to show you the map because I wanted you to have an idea of where this particular, some of the events occur. Around the Caracas area, and then Guatire, we'll talk about in just a moment, is another type of paranda tradition that occurs, is in this particular region here, not far from Caracas. Again, you have these musicians that go from house to house. Again, they use the term aguinaldos, and these are carols, Christmas carols. And they will sing these as they go. Sometimes they can be secular, sometimes they can be sacred, okay? And the word itself, aguinaldo, means Christmas carol, okay? And the ensemble, let's think about this, the same type of music that we had before. And this would be singers. You will have a cuatro, which is a small guitar-like instrument, of course. You have maracas and the charrasca, metal gourd scraper. So whether it's by the name of guiro or charrasca, you will have these type of instruments that you will find just like you did in Puerto Rico. Okay. You also have a friction drum that called furuco for a friction drum. Okay. So let's look at some of the other characteristics here. So in neighboring Trinidad, many people who lived in Venezuela is very, very close to Trinidad. As we know, Trinidad is the southernmost island in the Lesser Antilles, the smaller islands in the lower chain there, of course, of the Caribbean islands here. It's the last one before you get to South America. And it is very, very close to Venezuela. So a lot of Venezuelans migrate and live in Trinidad, or have lived there for many, many years. So they have brought the tradition over to Trinidad, where it is called parang. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But also, so the aguinaldos, or the Christmas carols, we mentioned some of the instruments. Many of them are the same that you will find in Puerto Rico. Okay? So I want to play another example for you, and this is of a song called Viva el Parandón. Should be an in there, Viva el Parandón. And this particular translation, it says the paranda, which is the festivity of the party, the group of people have arrived. The party has begun. Open the door. Open the front gate. Let's toast with liquors, food, and the warmth of your company. And the party is at its height, filling the air with the smell of Christmas. Christmas carolers sing with happy voices, and they sing they sing their best. So this is what the translation. Now the group that's going to perform now, un solo pueblo, one people. And this particular group is quite well known. It's a Venezuelan musical group that was formed in 1976, and the performers primarily focus on paranda and other traditional forms of music. One People, the name of the group, is the most widely known and celebrated of these groups in the country. And they have really had a major role in preserving the traditional music in Venezuela and promoting this throughout the country, especially Afro-Venezuelan music. So let's listen to their version of the song that we just, Viva el Parandón.
Llegó la parranda, llegó el parrandón. llegó la parranda, llegó el parrandón, ábranos la puerta, abran el portón. Brindemos licores, comida y calor, brindemos licores, comida y calor.
Ya revienta la parranda, perfumando el aire de la Navidad. Cantan los animalmeros, con voces alegres su mejor cantar. Cantan los animalmeros, con voces alegres su mejor cantar.
Y en pesebre humilde nació el niño Dios, y en pesebre humilde nació el niño Dios. Celebremos todos con gozo y amor el sueño de un año, la fiesta del sol, el sueño de un año, la fiesta del sol.
Ya revienta la parranda, perfumando el aire de la Navidad. Cantan los animalmeros, con voces alegres.
So I want to tell you about another paranda tradition that occurs that's not associated with Christmas, but it involves people in a procession of singers, of carolers. And this is a big event that is held in the Guarenas, Guatire Valley, which is in this particular area in Paranda de San Pedro, occurs on June the 29th in the city of Guatire. And basically, the procession and dancing of this fiesta is accompanied by the cuatro again, maracas, similar again, and foot stomping and singing. Now, the characters, they reenact a story, and this goes back to colonial days. They blacken their faces, okay, and to represent African ancestors. The characters include, and all of them are men in some cases, whether they're playing women's roles or not. They dress as in the costume as all men that participate. One is called Maria Ignacia, a man dressed as a woman, of course. In this case, you also have one who carries and dances with the statue of St. Peter. You have a flag bearer. You have two boys who dance next to Maria Ignacia, and two dancers with large squares of thick leather, and that they use as a stomping to stamp, to make sound when they stamp on the ground. So let's take a look at this. It's very interesting, the paranda tradition in San Pedro.
La sentencia albergada en la garganta pasa de murmullo a canto. La historia se repite anualmente para sostener un culto y una festividad surgidos en algún momento a finales de la colonia y cuyos símbolos principales son San Pedro y la parranda. A pesar de las búsquedas efectuadas por colectividades y entes del Estado venezolano, no es posible asignar fecha precisa al milagro y al inicio de la parranda de San Pedro, originaria de las poblaciones de Guarenas y Guatire, que conformaban una sola zona en el hoy central estado Miranda, en Venezuela. Eso sí, San Pedro cuenta con la tradición oral.
San Pedro es todo. San Pedro es Guatire, San Pedro es Guarena. San Pedro es cada uno de aquellos que prenden una vela el 29 a las 6 de la mañana y salen de su casa. Es todo.
El personaje principal es María Ignacia. Ya sabemos ya que María Ignacia es la promesa que hizo con su hija Rosa Ignacia. Y en esa época parece que eso fue cogiendo mucho auge, la promesa de María Ignacia, y los compañeros de ella la acompañaban también a la iglesia. Y ella bailaba y cantaba su San Pedro rústicamente, ¿no? Y los amos le dieron el día de asueto a todos los esclavos de esa familia de las negras. Ellos eran libres, ese día era libre.
Se enfermó María Ignacia después del milagro. Y en su lecho de muerte, de su enfermedad, le pide a su esposo que continuara con la promesa que ella le hizo al santo. Y él le contó.
there. But it's a really interesting tradition and fascinating tradition that they have there. Okay, let's go into Trinidad and Tobago. Now, as I mentioned to you before, the whole process or the tradition in Trinidad was introduced by the Venezuelans who moved there or who migrated there. And it's a popular folk music tradition that it was introduced, as I mentioned, by Venezuelan immigrants. Many of the immigrants were of Amerindian, Spanish, and African heritage, and their ethnicity is emphasized in their music. So the term parang itself means a spree or a fete, a party, and they believe it comes from two particular terms, paranda meaning that, or parar, to stop. Okay. Past performance practices. In the past, they would visit the homes and the families like they do in Venezuela, like they do in Puerto Rico, with their singing. Popular today in several particular places, and I'm going to go back to the map because I want to show you some of the places that it's popular. Find my little. Here we go. In this particular area, Maraval, you find the parang performed there. Le Pinois here, and in the area right above Arima, which is a very important cultural place as well. Okay. Now, we also mentioned the aguinaldo, or simply Christmas carols, and they relate to the story of the Nativity in many cases. And they travel from traditionally, as the traditional carolers do, from house to house. And this is still practiced in some cases, but now they have expanded this to include national competitions. National competitions where you have entire parang groups that will perform. And here are some of the dishes that you'll have. Pastille, sorrel, most of you have had sorrel before, rum, and ponche crema, despite eggnog like they have in Puerto Rico as well. So these traditions, although these are in various locations, but there's a good distance between Puerto Rico and Trinidad, and the similarity of the traditions in these three places is very, very interesting. So we talked about some of the instruments. Notice the same instruments that you just saw from Venezuela, the cuatro, maracas, and also, in many cases, the claves, the two sticks, and also some cases. Now, they'll include here other string instruments, violin in addition to the guitar. This would be in Trinidad now, okay? So I want to introduce you to and show you two particular performers, and then a group that will perform. The next performer here is Alexandra Daisy Voisin, who is really a living legend in Trinidad, and she died in 2011, let me get this, 1991, sorry, 1924 to 1991. And this is her performing. Everyone in Trinidad knows her as an important parang singer. Oops. So I want to move on to two other people performing Scrunter. And some of you know Scrunter, if you know soca music. Now, Ronnie mentioned yesterday that he knew him, or at least knows of his music and everything. He's very popular in Trinidad. He's a parang artist and a soca artist as well. And the song that he's going to sing now is something probably some of you may have heard. At least the phrase, it's a popular song done at Christmas time. I want a piece of pork. Okay.
La 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 la.
when they take traditional parang and they mix it with soca, it's soca parang. Soca parang. Okay, now I want to go to a group that, as I told you, they have a national parang competition in Trinidad and Tobago. And I mentioned to you the three particular areas, but this group, Los Alumnos de San Juan, have performed, and well, actually they perform quite regularly, and they have won, at least in 2009, they had already won the competition like 7 or 8 times. So they're a very, very popular group, and I want to play, this is for the group competitions.
Déjame pasar, que mi madre enferma. Sí, me mandó a llamar. Ay, como la gente espera que por tu calle pasar aquí si hasta San Francisco pueda. A mí sale madrugada. Ay, como la gente espera y por tu calle pasar aquí si hasta San Francisco pueda. A mí sale madrugada. Río Manzanares, déjame pasar, que mi madre enferma. Me mandó a llamar. Río Manzanares, déjame pasar, que mi madre enferma. Te mandó a llamar. Mi madre es única estrella, que alumbra mi porvenir y se llega a morir. Al cielo me voy con ella. Mi madre es única estrella, que alumbra mi porvenir y se llega a morir. Al cielo me voy con ella. Río Manzanares, déjame pasar, que mi madre enferma. Me mandó a llamar. Río Manzanares, déjame pasar, que mi madre enferma. Me mandó a llamar.
Okay, so I want to move on to our last section here, which is our largest section, of course, but I want to mention that there are other paranda traditions, Panama, Grenada, and possibly in other places as well. It's interesting, today I had a conversation with James Lovell, and he mentioned to me that when I talked to him about the paranda workshop and everything, he said they're having a similar thing in which they represent or celebrate the different paranda festivities and celebrations in the Caribbean in New York. So they have a program that they do as well, where they have people from Venezuela, other people who do paranda tradition as well. So let's move on now to Central America and Garifuna culture. So it's always interesting for me and very humbling when I'm talking to an audience when a good number of the people are Garifuna. So please bear with me, and I hope I am doing some things correctly here. So we talk about, of course, this particular region here from Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua as the central place for originally we know the birth of the culture happens in St. Vincent, and then with the migration or the exile to Central America here in the late 1700s. 1797 or so. So let's talk about the profile here, and this is also for our video documentation. Now the Garifuna, as we know, are a synthesis of indigenous peoples of West Africa and the Amerindians in the Eastern Caribbean. And we talk about this as the Carib and the Arawak, also known in Taino, as we know. Now, they have a common sacred and secular system or body of rituals that are done, similar beliefs and practices, and of course an Arawak and Carib-based language and repertoire dance song genres. It's interesting, every time I go to a particular place, and I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in Belize and been through Guatemala, La Buga, and also down to Trujillo and to La Ceiba, and to also on the island of Roatan. I learned a lot that I didn't know before. And I'm always humbled at the amount of information that's out there and the various traditions that still exist that have not been done, that a lot of research has not been done on. So that's important to know. So when we think about the totality of the Garifuna, we need to think about the 300,000 or so that are in Central America. And we don't know an exact population. We can only do an estimate, but we know the major countries. They're Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. We also know that there are many locations outside of Central America. And we know primarily largest population in New York, next here in Los Angeles, and also Chicago. Now, there's also sizable populations in New Orleans, I think Miami, Washington. We have about 20 or so families in Atlanta. And there's also community in Michigan, in most of the other major cities. You'll find at least some number of Garifuna. Okay? Houston as well. Okay, Native American ancestry. So we need to think about the various groups that make up the Native American ancestry: the Carib, the Arawak, the Taino, and Igneri here. Now, when we think about the places that they came from, we have to think about why the Carib and the Arawak ended up in these islands in the Caribbean. So let's take a look at the map here of South America. Now, this is a Native American map here, and I like to show this to my students because they get a chance to see where the group of people were originally. And many cases in the Native Americans who live in the Amazon region are still, of course, in this particular area. So we have, let me find my, okay, the Arawak and Carib here. And the Arawak migrate through the left to be hanged for a crime I have committed, meaning if I did something wrong, then talk about me. But I don't deserve the gossip that you're having because I've done nothing wrong. And it's basically the grandfathers and godfathers see this behavior, but they learned it from you, and now it hurts you to see them act this way. Okay? So let's listen to and watch Junior Aranda singing Mingigili and Malateisien. Listen to a portion of it, sorry. Okay, so let's move to our last parandero. Well, we actually have one more, a living one here. Mr. Aziatic is going to come for us. And Paul Nabor, King of Paranda. And Nabi, as he's often affectionately known, and known primarily there. And actually, he's the person that is known most globally in the parandero throughout the world, and primarily for his song Nuguyane. So, Alfonso Palacio, 1928, 2014, considered the greatest parandero of his time. And I was talking to, did we ever find out anything about birth?
No.
Not yet, okay. So there's a little discrepancy, but we think he's possibly born in La Buga, and spending most of his time, his life there between La Buga and PG in Punta Gorda. And one daughter, of course, here in LA, recorded 10 songs on the 10 songs recorded, and most widely well known is Nuguyane, of course. I toured internationally, and actually in 2008, when I had the Garifuna Symposium in Atlanta, he came and he performed at that point in time. I don't know how old he was at that point. That's 2008, so it's 6 years before this period in time. So he was 80 at the time. And he traveled extensively a lot of times, of course, slowing down near the end, and he unfortunately died of a stroke. Now, there was a big musical tribute, 8 performers, major performers there at the big sports arena where they had a musical tribute to him before he died. A lot of dignitaries came. The Sir Corval Young and Aurelio flew in from Spain, where he was at the time, to attend the funeral and the interment services. The youth in the city, the students, as well as tourists, lined the street all the way for the procession following the service. Okay. Now we'll listen to Nuguyane, most of us know. And this was performed, I always wondered about the words on this, but once I read some things, this is actually performed when his sister was on her deathbed. And this is why the words are there. Brother, I am ill. Dear brother, I am ill. I have tossed and turned in my bed. With this ailment in the presence of my family, I have spoken with my children. Dear brother, when I pass away, I must have a band at my funeral. It's the little ones I'm worried about. It's my children that I'm worried about. It was interesting to me when I first went to Belize a number of years back to see after that there would be musicians going down the street, and I found out someone had past. I didn't know. I knew about this tradition in New Orleans. I didn't know about it among the Garifuna. I didn't know at that point in time, but this definitely exists. So Ronnie's going to come forward now. We're going to listen to a little bit of the section here on Nuguyane, and he's going to talk to us. You want to do translation or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Es un señor que es más que un artista. Él toca desde que tiene, no sé, 15 años.
He's more than an artist.
Y ha compuesto, no sé, tantas canciones que ni siquiera ya se acuerda de ellas. Él vivía en su pueblo de Punta Gorda atendiendo su templo y nunca se le había ocurrido que le iba a salir de ahí a grabar un disco. Y lo que pasó fue todo un fenómeno, que fue que grabó el disco y inmediatamente la canción Nuguyane fue...
I'll pause it.
Yeah, that's a lot of translating to do.
Paul Nabor es un señor que es más que un artista.
Paul Nabor is more than an artist.
Él toca desde que tiene, no sé, 15 años. Toca la...
He plays, as far as I remember, at the age of 15.
guitarra y ha tocado toda su vida y ha compuesto, no sé, tantas canciones que ni siquiera ya se acuerda de ellas.
He has been playing all of his life. He has written so many songs that even up until today, at this day, he might not even remember some of the songs.
Él vivía en su pueblo de Punta Gorda atendiendo su templo y nunca se le había ocurrido que le iba a salir de ahí a grabar un disco.
He spent most of his time living in PG, Punta Gorda, attending his temple, his Dabuyaba, and it never occurred to him that he one day was going to leave the area to go perform all over the world.
Y lo que pasó fue todo un fenómeno, que fue que grabó el disco y inmediatamente la canción Nuguyane.
And it was like a phenomenon. The moment he recorded the album, and the song Nuguyane made it on the charts of the world music.
Fue un éxito total.
It was a total success.
Okay, I wanted him to give some of that. I want to, one thing I want to mention to you before Aziatic comes up, and there's some things I was thinking about, but I won't go into all of the things, some things that are about my research, but the one thing I want to mention to you in reference to what Joe Palacio, and Joe Palacio, most of you may know him, Garifuna, very important, and the most published Garifuna scholar, and he mentioned some things in an article that I was reading that he had about what he considers these three components of diasporic identity. So everyone who's Garifuna who lives outside of Central America is a part of the Garifuna diaspora. Okay, and he says Palacio's three components, becoming uprooted, becoming different, and self-conscious connectivity, refers to feelings associated with being a member of a diasporic people. All three are related to a person's feelings of physical displacement from his culture and his place of origin, and feeling different or alien in the new environment of residence. The concept of self-consciousness, connectivity, one's place of origin, traditionally accompanies feelings that many immigrants have of longing for what was culturally familiar. Because music is familiar orally and linguistically in how it sounds in the language, it is a marker of culture. That is it is that which is recognizably familiar. Therefore, it functions as a phenomenon that soothes the pains associated with being disconnected from your culture. Okay? All right. Okay. Now, we want to talk a bit about our guest here. Thank you all for being so patient, and I had, when I would do presentations, I try to make sure that provide information, and thank you for that. We'll move into our last section now with Aziatic. And in this particular case, I asked, he sent me a bio, and I knew he had accomplished a lot, but I didn't know how all the specifics, a lot of the specifics. So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights that are on his bio that we have here. Born in Hopkins, and as you will find out, he is the nephew of Junior Aranda. Okay, performing artist, producer, composer, and has done a lot as an entrepreneur to promote other artists, other Garifuna artists and other artists here, and serves as a mentor to many of the younger musicians. 20 years as a professional performer, beginning in 1996 with his album, with the CD Jam 96X. And music and theater productions from his childhood. So this is his exposure and his ability to perform on stage and his comfort there from that. And we, as many of you, some of you may know, are very much so influenced by the work of Michael Jackson. His family moved to New York, where he began and had a great deal of knowledge and learned a lot about the music industry, about the business, about studio recording and the business of that, and background vocals. He's a choreographer, as well as a vocalist in the group Kid Power, and that's where he met two very important people here, Barry Faceman from Fame and Paula Abdul. Performed with Andy Palacio and Paul Nabor and a number of different artists. And what I did not know until recent years is how much producing he's done for shows here in LA and other places and artists as well. So we can see some of the recordings that he has, some noted CDs, and there are 11 solo albums that he's produced, and produced a lot that he's had, and produced a number of other artists. So let's welcome up to and this is Aziatic, Vince Lewis.
Hello, everyone.
And these are some scenes of Hopkins. Where's your house? You have
right around here. Right there.
Right there?
Is that the police station right there?
Right, that's the police station.
This is how you get in.
Right?
You get in, the first thing you're going to see right here. That's the culvert. What you call it? Vat. Yeah, that's where they used to collect water. Back when I was young, we didn't have water, like running water, so that's where that was a village. Water.
Yeah, that kept it water.
Yeah, kept it.
Is it the same area that they used to have the phone? Because many of the times there was one phone booth in the state.
It's where the police station is. We didn't have police stations back then.
Yeah, you didn't need them, I guess.
We still don't need it, but I guess the government decided to put one there. We only have one policeman too. He doesn't do anything but chill. He doesn't do anything. But that building was there when they had the hurricane when I was a kid. I think. And I remember looking through this window right here and seeing the house fall. And I said something. They always clown me about it. Yeah, that was there.
Right.
That's my village. Yeah. That's kind of in front of my house.
Oh wow. It's interesting. The Hopkins is a place people go to cool out from Dangriga, if you can imagine. When Dangriga gets busy, they go to Hopkins to cool out. And another thing.
Yeah, it's a picture I took the last time.
Oh, you took this?
I took this one.
Oh, wow.
I was in Hopkins the other day, we was hanging out, having breakfast, just having a good time.
Okay. So I want to play something that I want him to talk a little bit about.
It's not bland, it's not empty. I mean, my feeling comes out when I sing. Yeah. So when you hear songs like, it's Sunday good day. Fading out the sun, we passing what you want. Sing along to it, you know the song.
Actually,
Can you tell us a little bit about that particular song?
Well, this song actually was written by this lady in New York, and I recorded it in New York. I was recording an album called The Finale, and actually was referred to me by a friend of mine. He was like, "Man, I think you could do with this song." So I went ahead and recorded it because I actually liked the message in it. It pretty much talks about it's saying that sound you hear to like sickness that is like, I guess people were saying like sickness that's like the worst, or the worst sickness ever is like not being able to see. You know, like sounding hurting, like marihin. Like if you're not able to see, it's like probably one of the worst things ever. You know, to go through in life. But that's at least it's based on this song. I'm sure there's worse things than that.
Good. So we're going to do a quick some interview questions. I have some questions I want to talk to him about. So how did you? Let's see. Here we go. How did you get the name Aziatic?
Man, I wish I could give you guys like something exciting, but it's not. I just made it up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was trying to find a name that sets me apart from everybody else. And I was trying to find something that I've never heard in my life, something that would, when someone say, they can say, you know what, or if you ever hear it, you know it would just be about me. Like nobody else had that name.
Okay.
But I think there is someone else now. So.
Cool. Yeah, there's one. There's two of you now. Okay. Okay, tell us about your life and growing up in Hopkins. I'm sure you experienced a culture shock when you moved to LA. Tell us about how that affected you, and especially going from an environment where you were surrounded by culture to one on a daily basis, even when you ran outside, to coming to LA where there were different activities but not as many.
Yeah. Well, growing up in Hopkins, I grew up at a time when we didn't have any electricity. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any running. Shocking when I moved out here from there, because again, I remember the first time I saw a light bulb. You know, I remember like in my village we didn't have light, as you know, at one point, but at some point they decided to put electricity, and my house actually had a lamppost right in front of it. So and we actually had a light on ours, because they were like lights on every other lamppost. And the one in front of my house, we had a light. And I remember like around like when it would get dark, whatever time that was, 5:30 or whatever time that was, like we'd all be outside waiting for the light to come on. And when the light came on, we'd start clapping like it was like the biggest thing, you know. But I remember that. I remember like I said, we didn't have running water, so I mean, going to the well and getting water in the morning, those were my chores. You know, I had to get water from the well. I had to rake the yard, like things like that. And if I didn't do it, trust me, my dad, he didn't play. But it was fun. And, you know, I mean, the thing about it is that, again, you can't miss what you don't know. And growing up in that environment, like, it was like the best to me. I mean, we had a good time, and I didn't know anything about stuff out here. And like I said, I remember the first time I saw a television. We had a radio, and I actually thought there were two people in the radio. I thought it was a man and a woman who could change their voices. And sometimes the radio would break, and my dad would open it, and I would try to find these people. And I used to think like they were just running high, because I would look throughout the radio trying to find these people in the radio. But I mean, it was cool. But yeah, it was definitely a shell shock. I remember the first time I came to America, it was on a vacation, and I went to there was a grocery store called The Boys, I think. And I remember I walked in, the door opened, and I ran away, like, because I got scared. I didn't know who opened the door. So I thought it was, you know, where I come from, we also used to think about ghosts and stuff like that. So right. So things like that was, you know, it was cool. But now thinking back about it, it's just pretty funny. So it was cool.
So what were your first memories of hearing paranda in Belize?
I mean, again, in my village, what we had for entertainment was drums. And initially, when I first heard paranda, it was always just drummers and the women or men, whoever singing. It wasn't really like one singer. I didn't know what a solo artist was. We didn't have such things. Maybe there were. I don't know. I didn't know about it. But during like I remember like around Christmas time, my uncle would come over. My uncle Junior Aranda, that's my dad's brother. So his name is Aranda, but he's really a Lewis. But he got his mom's last name. That's their business. I don't know nothing about it. But so a lot of people don't know he's my uncle, but yeah, that's my dad's brother. So on Christmas, during like Christmas time, he would come to my house and with his guitar, and everywhere he went with his guitar. and he would sit on the porch and sing songs and literally make up songs on the spot. These guys, from what I understand, they didn't even write songs. Like they would just like create a song right then and there, and it was always based on something happening. Right. So how he remembered it, I don't know, because again, he'd sit here right now and make up a song about somebody, but he'll sing it again tomorrow and then the week after or whatever, and he would just remember him. So I used to sit there and stare at him forever. I was always like fascinated by it. And I think, and when I really think about it, I believe he was my first like person I looked at as who I idolized. Even though at the time I didn't know that was such thing as idolizing somebody. I didn't know what that word was growing up. So, but now when I think about it, I think I was idolizing him because I used to watch him and I used to always want to be like him and sing, because I've always liked singing. I didn't know I could sing, I used to just sing. Like, I would just open my mouth and sing and follow him. And I remember he used to make up songs even like, I remember a couple songs he made up in my house. I don't remember the name of them, but I remember like if I hear it, like some songs he made up, like just by sitting on my porch, like on the veranda, we'd be drinking the same thing he was talking about, the eggnog. Eggnog, yeah. My mom used to make that stuff. Yeah, so we used to just sit there and watch him and listen to him all day.
So who would you put on your list of the top 3 or 4 most influential paranderos? And why?
To me or just in general?
To you. Or?
Well, I mean, I would say my uncle would be the first, only because again he was the one I knew closely, And as I grew up and started learning about other singers, I would definitely say Paul Nabor.
Okay.
Him and I, because once I got to meet him, I used to hang out at his house in PG, by the Weeba. Yeah, I used to go there. I would sit with him like for hours and just talk. Like he'd have like crazy stories, and him and I would just have conversations for like hours and hours and hours. And he'd always drink his hot Guinness because he has to have his hot Guinness. So we would sit there and just conversate, converse all day.
Anybody else?
Andy Palacio.
And Palacio, okay.
Yeah, again, a very close friend of mine, and he taught me a lot, in terms of just having talks. We just talk all day. All these guys, all we do is just talk. We'd be in hotel rooms talking, we'd be driving, talking, and so of course, he influenced me a lot, taught me a lot, and I look up for him.
I look up to him. Okay. Let's see. You mentioned that. Okay. When and how did you become a professional musician?
I never knew I was a professional. I don't know. Well, I mean, I would say the first time I did a record was the Jam 96. It was actually something I was recording, not really to release. At the time, I was living at this house in Studio City, and we had a full like professional studio.
Oh wow!
This big producer who produced like Pointer Sisters and Patti LaBelle, all these people, and he put me in charge of the studio. I had to maintain the studio. So at night, I mean, they were like night owls, so we'd be up all night. So one day, he'd go through spells where he wouldn't come down from his house upstairs. I mean, it was a mansion, so he used to be upstairs, and I had the down floor, the bottom floor. I wouldn't see him for days. So I'd get bored, and I didn't have a car. So I couldn't leave. I mean, up on the hill somewhere. I couldn't go to LA, hang out with my cousins and my friends, so I get bored. So I started messing around in the studio. So I started recording beats, and that's how I started recording Jam 96. It was really just me messing around. So I would let my mom hear it. So my mom was like, man, this sounds really good, you should release it. And I'm like, release what? She's like, you should release these songs. And that's how I came out with Jam 96, because I was just recording songs just because I was bored and I was just having fun. Wow. And I guess she told me she liked it, so I figured maybe if she liked it, other people might like it, so I just put it out.
Good. She didn't lie. Okay. When did you start producing other artists and Garifuna events?
Well, I started producing concerts. I started in high school, like doing like shows in high school for what do you call them in high school? Assemblies. And I invited. I think they were having cultural. Was it a week or day? Something like that. But I used to go to Hamilton High School, and it's for the performing arts. Okay. So they would have like cultural I think Day. So I went to one of the music teachers I knew, and I asked him if it was okay for me to invite a Punta Rock or band to come to the school. And he was like, well, you gotta, they gave me a run around at first, of course, but I was determined. So I went ahead and I spoke to the principal, I spoke to all these other people, and finally said, okay, if you do it, this is all gonna be on you. I said, oh, okay, I don't know what that meant, but I'll do it. So I called Boblin Warriors. And that's why I called Boblin Warriors with Jess Flores.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I told him, hey, I want you guys to come down here and do a show. But what we had set up was it would be a show every hour for all, 7 periods, I believe? How many periods in high school? I don't remember.
Yeah, 6 or 7.
All periods. So we had to set up a show for all those things. And I had to set up all the sound. And my school at that time, like it said, is for performing arts. So it's the sound and the lighting is
like
out
really
there.
Yeah.
Like it's like a real concert, right? So, but I had to hire the guy, get the money to hire the guy to do this lighting and the sound and everything. And I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And I invited the guys over, and I went to talk to the teachers to bring their class to the auditorium during those periods.
Okay.
And it was a huge success. I mean, it was amazing. And I got the bug, and I was like, man, I could do this. But I never thought about doing it in the Garifuna community. I just felt like I could do this, like, I could do the next Michael Jackson concert for him if he wanted me to. Right. That's how big my hair got, right? So I think what got me into doing it in the Garifuna community was, I went to do a show, and I think it was Labuga involved with a show at one of Prince Hall.
Okay.
And I walked in, and I was like, looking at the crowd. I started looking, I said, man, I think I could do this, you know? I went home, and I talked to my cousin, talked to him about doing it. Anyway, the point is, I talked him into doing it, and then I called Labuga, and I told him I wanted him to be a part of the first big concert I did, which was I brought this band, Punta Rebels, out here.
Oh, okay.
And the rest was history. From then on, we just build on it.
Wow. Do you know about how many shows you produce?
A lot. No, I don't. I lost track.
Okay. All right. So we're going to listen to your uncle do a song, and then we want to talk to you about your version of this song.
Oh,
okay?
Cool. Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about Luiba Wasinu?
Let's play it, and then we'll
talk
about it on the other end.
Okay. Or translation, you can tell them what it's about.
Ya wadira ni de kuno ka sawa wire da Kurukuti bebele la deira govenie Tangri la bebele la deira la miselau Swagadi churuto Kaya waberang Odiene masa balu de alia bawai buka Yegu mega bayo de gia kodemino
Okay. Go ahead. You want to just talk about?
Well, I mean, what you guys heard right now were two different versions of the same song. Again, the first version was my uncle, and the second one was a recording I did just recently from my upcoming Paranda project. Again, I mean, the song just talks about how, basically saying that it's kind of speaking about a community. If someone is doing something in the community where the community then like kind of shuns you or like pushes you away, so basically what he's saying, like, if you can't even be accepted in your own culture, in your own community, then where else are you going to be able to live, or where else can you rule, or be a king or a queen, basically. So again, it's like what the doctor had said earlier. The songs that most Paranda songs pretty much was talking about situations that people are going through, or something that's happening that people just talk about. I mean, again, you just write about what you see or what you're seeing around you, and it's also lessons. I guess trying to show you the best ways to go to live your life, you know. And we just put it in song. I mean, it's more like we're trying to do whatever we can to try to educate the culture so that everybody can live an honest and righteous life, I guess.
When you take a song like that, is there a particular process you go through, like to make it, to modernize it, or to make it more accessible to youth now? I mean, is there how are you inspired to do that? What do you do with, you change the drumming pattern? I know you speed the tempo up, but is there a way you go about doing it, or is it from one song to the next?
I mean, the process is pretty much the same. I think what changes is just the mood you're in at the moment, the feel that I'm in that moment. How am I feeling that moment determines the music that surrounds that song. The drum pattern, again, it's pretty much stays the same, because the only thing we're trying to do is recreate what that's doing with the drum pattern in on like a drum machine. You know what I'm saying? That's the only, as long as you can we try to recreate that, but then build around it so that it can then be something more acceptable by the younger people in terms of like the instrumentation, right? But also what you're feeling, you know. I mean, because it could go either way. I mean, I might create something different for the song, and you might create something else different, but it's all about what you're hearing.
Hear what you're hearing.
But then it all comes out about who, you know, whatever that you come up with.
I have two last questions here. First is, although punta and punta rock are the styles of Garifuna music that move the hips, paranda moves the heart. Paranda songs are proverbial in that they contain proverbs and lessons about how one should live or should not live, how one should act or should not act. What are your thoughts about this? Can you recall any personal experiences about Paranda songs that have messages or themes that related to things that have maybe been going on in your life?
I mean, I do agree Punta Rock will make you shake. Am I lying? Yeah, it's hypnotizing. Paranda music, again, that's definitely is a good way to explain it. Like it's like the soul. It's from the soul. The best way to explain it again is almost like when you have like a pop song or like a techno song. You know, you're not gonna really sing "I love you, baby." So you can, but it's not gonna be as effective as if you slow it down to like a ballad. You see what I'm saying? Ballads, you put a ballad on there, that emotion can come out, and especially when you're trying to create melodies and vocal styles, it's much more pleasing to the ear and much more emotional when it's slow. So Paranda is the same way. You know, so then if you're telling a story, you can tell that story. And now you can actually fit more words into a Paranda to really get your point across, because the tempo is slower. Now, if you go faster, I mean, you can do it, because it won't be as effective in terms of emotion. And sometimes when you're trying to tell a story, emotion is important. You have to have that emotion. If the emotion isn't there, sometimes the message gets lost. So I think Paranda, that's where Paranda kind of separates from Punta in terms of...
Yeah, so you've recorded, you've transformed several Paranda songs. Are those the ones that like speak to you more? You understand what I'm saying? Are there certain things about a given song that you decide?
The song that comes to mind when you ask this question is the song you shared earlier, Malate.
Malate.
Because I mean, when I was younger, I used to find myself trying to please people. And I think, I mean, I ain't gonna say a lot of people do that, but you know, there are people out there who do that. We try to please people and you know, like sometimes people act a certain way towards you, and then you want to now do things for them, or when you go out, you know, you want to pay for things for them, and you know, you tend to want to do that because you're trying to win over their love or something. I don't know. But then at the end of the day, you start realizing they're only going to be nice to you at that moment because they're getting something from you. But then guess what? They really don't like you.
Right.
They read them because, and then so then when that song says that, it was a song because I think I had asked my mom one time to kind of translate for me, and when she explained it to me, I was like, wow, you know, because I found myself doing that. I found myself trying to get people who I knew didn't like me to like me.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so now I'm like, man, whatever. You know,
we've all done
that. Like me, it's all good. You know, it's really powerful when it comes to that, and I think a lot of people can relate to it at some point in their life. I'm sure someone has probably been in that situation. You know,
right?
Yeah.
That's really important what you just said, and I think that's one of the things that's universal about the message in a lot of the parandas. It's very, very universal. I'm going to play his version while he's getting set up to do your other thing.
Oh, sure.
And of Malatayisian, but one thing I want to say, and this is just as a person. Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes. Yes. Come on. Let me say one thing here. To me, paranda, as an African American, I'm not Garifuna, and people have said it, have questions. I said no, I'm not Belizean either, but I just fell in love with the culture and fell in love with the music and the things that I've learned a lot about why I can call myself an African American, as a result of my experiences with the Garifuna people. Because a lot of practices that they've been able to maintain and cultural things were taken and were not allowed for African Americans to express here. You know, I'm from the South, and so I have a big affinity with Garifuna culture. I tell people that it's my father's side of the family. My father there were 15 of them growing up, so I said that's my Garifuna side. Because there's so many of them. But let me say this one thing. I said, to me, paranda is Garifuna blues. It is a genre of music that allows Garifuna men to express their challenges in life, their pains, their disappointments, their desires, loss of loved ones, their mortality, their joys, and so on. For that reason, it seems to me to be the soul or the essence of the humanity of Garifuna men and Garifuna people as a whole. So, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is June Alvarez. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City. But families from Honduras, Guatemala, and Belize. I'm an upcoming artist, as well as Punta artist that goes by the name of Lil June. I just want to give a little story real quick, before we actually, continue the program. But as a kid growing up, being around, the Garifuna family and stuff like that, as a little kid, you just growing up and you just like wondering what's going on, right? So, yeah, just growing up, just listening to Punta music and Paranda music, and as a little kid, I'm just like, what is this? You understand? Like, nobody actually really took the time to really explain what kind of music, I'm surrounded by, my parents, mom and dad, because growing up as a kid, seeing your parents having fun and doing this and stuff like that, you just like, oh, okay, right? You're like, okay, nice. But I remember one day, my father, because my father's also a musician too, one of the original members of this New York band called History and Ethnomusicology, one of the popular bands. Yeah, and also Garifuna kids too in the beginning, but then, But anyway, my father would have this cassette. It's funny, this cassette, right? This cassette happens to be Jam 96 by Aziatic. So, I think, yeah, the first song was Chiquitibola. That's the song. So, the cassette, like the tape player and stuff like that, you gotta press play, you gotta stop and rewind and stuff like that. So, my father would just, put in the Jam 96 tape and actually rewind it because, the record would be in the middle already, these big things and stuff like that. But anyway, as soon as this song comes in, right, the music is playing in the living room. I will be somewhere in the house, like, maybe in my bedroom, playing a video game, but as soon as I hear that song, I I would actually run out of the bed and go straight into the living room. And go like this, like, oh. And I remember I went in front of my father and I'm like, Dad, what's that? And he finally said, this is Punta. And it's then like, even before that record came out, like I didn't really like Punta, but until that record came out, that's what really inspired me to even do what I'm doing right now as we speak. And this guy right here is my favorite artist. So make some noise for Aziatic. This is the guy right here, man. And it's an honor to be able to be this close to this guy, man. But Aziatic is the reason why I'm doing Punta music, man. So thank you, Aziatic.
Thank you, sir. Great stories. We're going to call the musicians to come over, please, and we're going to get ready for a show.
Butahiaro tanigugo alugalu ye beta kumuchunao barula busigan figya buiragma tu busigari siata aramuda tu busigari siata aramuda kasana degbe unitiro no pure Butahiaro tanigugo alugalu ye beta kumuchunao barula busigan figya buiragma tu busigari siata aramuda tu busigari kasana degbe unitiro no pure Butahiaro tanigugo alugalu ye beta kumuchunao barula busigar figya buiragma tu busigari siata aramuda tu busigari siata aramuda Nati Massimo, Rabi Bena, Nati Massimo, Rabi Bena, aye, Nati Massimo, Rabi Bena, Rabi Bena, Rinu Barane, Ayanuna Mugabu, Nati Massimo, Nati Massimo, Rabi Bena, aye, Nati Massimo, Rabi Bena, Rabi Bubena, Rinu Barane, Ayanuna Mugabu. Lagaligira, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, aye, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, Agi Sawala Gatenira Une, Agambarugo Tina Luago, Agi Sambugo, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, aye, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, Agi Sawala Gatenira Une, Agambarugo Tina Luago. Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, Agi Sawala Gatenira Une, Agambarugo Tina Luago. Lagaligira, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, aye, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, Agi Sawala Gatenira Une, Agambarugo Tina Luago. Agi Sambugo, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, aye, Agi Sambugo, Lagaligira, Agi Sawala Gatenira Une, Agambarugo Tina Luago.
Esrigola, Dina Uyama, Dida Tagu, Puri Muna, Seigola, Dina Uyama, Dida Tagu, Puri Muna, Seigola, Dina Uya, Dida Tagu, Puri Muna, Seigola, Dina Uya, Yayana, Puri Luo.
The Garifuna Paranda likely evolved when the Garifuna arrived in Central America. On mainland Honduras, the Garifuna interacted with the Spanish culture that already existed there. We have to keep in mind that on the island of Roatan, this Roatan was really an English colony, so it would have been when the Garifuna went to mainland Honduras that is where they encountered the Spanish culture and the paranda. So when we talk about the introduction of the guitar, this occurred when they were in Central America, and they interacted with the Europeans there. Now, Dan Rosenberg, in his liner notes from Paranda, Africa and Central America, confirms that the paranda actually entered the repertoire of the Garifuna traditional music in the 19th century, after the Garifuna arrived in Honduras. So let's think about this. So what happens to the culture? So they arrived in Honduras in 1797, and within 5 years of that, by 1802, the Garifuna had begun to migrate from Central America into Belize and Guatemala. So you cannot have a whole entire repertoire of music like all of paranda to exist, and to have the entire repertoire of songs exist only in a 5-year period of time. So what does this mean? So the repertoire existed, or the whole body of music, over a period of time. Because you have to remember this, Garifuna have the same language. They live in Belize, Guatemala, Honduras. So a person who has a brother or sister in Belize might also have a sibling, or from Belize might have a sibling in Honduras or in Guatemala, or close relatives. And so therefore they go back and forth between the countries because of the easy access and because of the language. And as they move, they travel, they take their songs with them. So that is one way, over the period of time, that paranda began to spread throughout this particular region. So a lot of the older Garifunas say that paranda was originally done during Christmas, and at that point in time. So that was when you had the majority of paranda sung. But it is often done now year-round, because many of the words are not specifically about Christmas. None of them really are. So they're really social commentary song forms that are composed by men and express their aspects of their interpretation of culture and society. Now, by the time they arrived in Central America, the paranda had already been there. And this is interesting because the Spanish had set up colonies, established settlements in a lot of the places. For example, we talked earlier about Venezuela. So the first Spanish settlement in Venezuela was in 1522, and in Puerto Rico in 1508, and in Honduras in 1524. So all of this, if you think about it, the Garifuna arrived in St. Vincent, or the culture evolved in St. Vincent in 1635. So if we keep that in mind, that is a whole century and a decade or two after you have the arrival of the Spanish establishing settlements in Venezuela, in Honduras, and in Puerto Rico. So when the Garifuna arrived in this area, the paranda already existed as it is. But they made the paranda their own, added their own music, added their own language, of course, and interpretations and songs based on their own practices. Now, although the only requirement to accompany the voice is the guitar, the use of drums, occasional hand percussion instruments was found in Puerto Rico, in Venezuela, and Trinidad. They support the existence of that this was a Spanish-derived cult practice in the region. Okay, now let's go into Juni Aranda. Simon Juni or Junior Aranda. He's born in Hopkins, Belize, and this is a hometown of Aziatic, who we'll hear from a little bit later. But he lived much of his life in Dangriga. He has 7 children, and he was born in 1939 and died in 2011. He was known to carry his guitar around with him wherever he went. and he was a featured vocalist in 3 of the songs on the Paranda CD, Africa and Central America. He received his first guitar at the age of 15, and unfortunately it was destroyed in Hurricane Hattie, as well as his uncle died in Hurricane Hattie. This is the uncle that taught him how to play paranda. He sang, oftentimes Junior Aranda sang about the devastation of Hurricane Hattie when he would do shows and when he would play for people. He claimed the paranda songs were ways of actually getting back at people in the culture. He said, when someone does bad things to you, you don't start fights. You get back at them in song. He stated that he has written songs about people in Dangriga who owe him money, former girlfriends, or former employers. So really, it's a form of social commentary and social control, the songs are. So people in town would soon learn about anyone who had crossed him or done him wrong because he'd write a song about it. He had quite a sense of humor, as evident in the song Mingigili, which is really all about unconditional love. And when unconditional love is no longer unconditional. So Junior Aranda passed, unfortunately, on March the 14th, 2011. And this was the 216th anniversary of the death of Joseph Chatouillet, who was the paramount chief of the Garifuna on St. Vincent. And he died in 1796. Junior Aranda was given a state's funeral in Dangriga.